Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand. Jessop's Journal is a collection of powerful, positive, and inspirational stories. It's time for Jessop's Journal.
Hi, I'm Doug Jessop. Welcome to this episode of Jessop's Journal, where we share powerful, positive, and inspirational stories. This week, we're doing kind of a tribute to what I'd call the long arm of the law. First up is a powerful story of a gentleman that's a prison guard. Have you ever felt that your life is in danger?
Yes.
Really?
It's odd that I don't hesitate to say that.
Spencer Cannad started his positive public service life wearing a U.S. Army uniform. Well, talking about uniforms, he's the kind of guy that would give his shirt off his back. I mean, really, he actually did donate a kidney to a neighbor. He now wears a badge.
He was in dire need, and I was in a position where we ended up being a perfect match, and none of his family members were, and so we did it.
Everyone has a story. Stories have power. Well, objects can have inspirational stories. Objects with stories are treasures remembered. In between, Chris Peterson entertains us.
Let that rain come down, let it rain all night, leave that angry wind howling outside the front door while we build this fire.
Now, Trent Weldon. In this episode of Jessop's Journal, I have a gentleman by the name of Trent Weldon. You've got a really, what I would think is a very stressful job.
I do.
What do you do?
So I am a sergeant for the Utah Department of Corrections.
Okay, sergeant for the Utah Department of Corrections. That sounds like you're at the prison.
I am. I work at the Draper prison. So I've been there for about 5 years now.
Wow.
And been sergeant for almost 3 of that.
How in the world did you determine, did you just wake up one day and said, I want to be a cop and I want to go work at the prison? I mean, how'd that come to be?
So it started I wanted to get into law enforcement after probably the age of 20.
Okay.
I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I don't know if it came from watching TV shows or wanted to make a difference. It just interested me enough that I was working in Cabela's for a seasonal part-time job in the warehouse.
Okay.
And a gentleman there who we became friends, he was in the process of going through the police academy to become an officer, a cop. And he finally told me one day, he goes, why don't you just do it? He says, quit complaining and just do it. You hate your job, you want to do something you like. So that's what really started the process of I started applying to be sponsored by departments. So the department can sponsor you through the training academy. They hire you on for a certain amount of time. You sign contracts and that. And after testing for numerous agencies, it was the prison that was the first one to offer me a job.
Wow.
And that's where I started.
Okay.
Started there. My initial thought was, I'll be here for 18 months, 2 years, transfer somewhere else. Well, 18 months came around and I liked what I was doing that I decided to stay.
I did a news story a while back that I got to ask you about because I had a hard time processing it. I went in, and I think I'm the only person that's ever gone in and done an interview inside the women's prison. And they said, okay, the one thing you cannot ask is why they're here. Okay. Well, I asked their names and everything, and I'll be honest, I did the mistake of after the news story of checking it out, and I'm going, oh. Yep. So do you guys know what people are in for, and how does that work?
I know when I need to know. So I don't ask them why they're there, but I have access to my database, and for housing requirements, potentially even some programming requirements, I know, but I never ask details. I have access to details, but I don't look into details.
Right.
For reasons of I have to sleep at night. But it's also, The other reason, and this is the hardest thing that I think people coming into this career have the hardest time learning, I still have to interact with that individual on a daily basis. And if I cloud my judgment, or if I lean towards a judgment, am I going to treat that individual with a bias, with a scarlet letter, have you, something that's going to make me not do my job appropriately towards that individual? So I know, but I don't go into detail.
Yeah, I can see that. We're going to ask a whole bunch of questions here that people out there, I got to say, geez, Doug, you got to ask him this.
I'm sure there's a lot coming in.
It's like, okay, here we go. When it comes to, I'm not sure what the exact term in your language is, but let's call them incidents. Okay. I'm presuming that you have seen and been part of incidents.
Yes.
Okay, and I know you can't give me details, but what kind of categories do these incidents fall in?
We can break them down to simple as a fight. So an aggressor, I would say behavioral incidents. We have mental health incidents. We could even break them down into self-inflicted incidents. So it's, are they going after, or are they fighting another individual, or are they fighting themselves? But then furthermore, then you can look into, is it a behavioral response that they're mad and trying to get attention or even help? Or is it a self-inflicted incident of they're in the middle of a delusion and don't really know what they're doing? Or is it a self-inflicted incident back to the emotion of they're very depressed, or there's a mental health concern on that basis?
So are the incidents that much different between the men's side and the women's side?
The men's side, I saw more aggression towards each other. The female side, I've seen more aggression internally.
Interesting. Have you ever felt that your life is in danger?
Yes. And
Really?
It's odd that I don't hesitate to say that.
Okay. I know you probably can't give me details, but can you give me generalities?
Generalities being, it kind of goes towards a ratio. If I can give a ratio of how many officers per how many inmates.
Okay.
I've had incidents where there are times I've been one officer to 48 inmates.
Whoa, hang on. One you.
One me.
48?
48.
Okay. One of the big things we talk about or we hear in the media is prison overcrowding and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. Is that really a problem?
It is to a standpoint, I would say. I think it depends on public perception versus opinion of how long prison sentences are, to even, pandemics we're facing right now in the world. There's a lot of people there, and I don't think people always understand why they're there. Because my reality is, they're arrested. I think people see that in the news, but then they forget about them, right? They're arrested. We're done with them. But what they don't understand is now they have to go somewhere, so they come to me, and now I am the one that I have to keep them there. I have to make sure they have their basic needs met, the necessities. Because once they're just arrested, we have to put them somewhere. So I think there's a large population, yes, but how do you physically staff 48 officers to 48 inmates, right? It's illogical, but it's an interesting mindset when you're one person and you have 48 individuals I don't want to say in charge of is too official.
Well, I understand you guys have taken an oath.
Yes.
That, from a protection standpoint, everything. Explain that to me.
So it's, I'm still a sworn safety officer of the state of Utah. My jurisdiction doesn't go beyond the prison, so I don't have, active policing capabilities in public. Mm-hmm. But in my jurisdiction of the prison, I still have civilians inside there, performing jobs, whether they're medical staff. We have individuals that, when outside of a pandemic we're facing, we have religious volunteers. We have high school teachers that come in part-time outside of their regular jobs to help these individuals. So number one priority is any civilianized personnel within the facility.
Okay.
They're my number one priority that I have to watch. The next personnel is going to be, other officers. I have a job, a duty to protect other officers, make sure their needs and safety are met. Then I also have, and this is the one that people struggle with, is I have a sworn duty to protect inmates. And the way I came to look at that is they're there for a reason, we know that, but they're still individuals. They're still a human being that have basic emotions and basic necessities. But I will say I have priorities. If I have a civilian in need, that's my first priority, down the chain to where they are.
So somebody has been there for a while. Mm-hmm. They do their time, they leave. How often do these same people come back?
It's unfortunately very high, to the point where they come into my unit and they know me. They know me by name. We use last names down there, and I recognize them. But it's those ones that, because every time I release somebody out of my building, I will tell them, like, good luck. Mm-hmm. And I had one stop and turn around and go, do you actually mean that? I go, yes, I do. I really do want you to succeed. My joke that I tell them is that there are prettier faces to wake up to than mine every morning. If you're seeing me every morning, we got something we got to work on.
Yeah.
But I do hope that whether it's a class they took, whether it's something I said, that they can integrate back into the community, become a productive member of society. Prison's not fun. I think we know that. Prison's not a fun place. So it is unfortunate to see that some individuals have a very difficult time breaking the habit or the addiction that will cause them to come back. But I do want them to succeed.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Jessop.
Thank you. This has been very exciting.
One of my favorite inspirational quotes is from Audrey Hepburn. She said, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." Everyone has a story. Chris Peterson has one heck of a story to tell through music. It's time for Jessop's Jukebox. A wise man told me that every phrase has a melody. Well, I don't know about you, but sometimes you just feel like you want to lock the whole world up. Chris, lock it up.
This world can be callous and cold as a November storm. Sometimes it comes at you from every direction at once. The only thing that ain't out of our hands is this moment right now that we're in. Let that rain come down. Let it rage all night. Leave that angry wind howling outside the front door while we build this fire. Lay your worries down. These arms of mine. For a little while longer, girl, let's turn the key and just lock the whole world outside. I won't pretend that I understand all of your doubts and your fears, but I'll be your shelter and shoulder as long as I'm here. I can't fix everything that life throws you, but I pray I'm the one that you run to when that rain comes down. Let it rage all night. outside for a little while longer. Just stay in my arms and we'll like the whole world outside.
I own all types of hats. There's fedoras, there's cowboy hats, there's Homburgs, and then there's this one. It's called the pork pie. Why do some people choose to serve and protect? Spencer Cannon has the answer. I have Spencer Cannon with me. Well, technically, I guess I should call you Sergeant Spencer Cannon.
Call me Spencer, that's just fine.
A lot of people see you on TV and on the media and all that stuff, but you and I met a couple years ago, and you did something really, really special. And I just wanted to kind of follow up on this. And we were talking off camera. It's a little longer than I thought, so time kind of flies, but you are a white guy that is a cop, that has a neighbor that is a black guy that needed a kidney. Fill me in on what happened next.
The only way I looked at that is that I had a friend who needed a kidney. We didn't talk about it much. We communicated and I knew what his condition was. I knew that he was going downhill. He was at a point where his kidney function was at about 2%. Ooh. I always used to think that people who were undergoing dialysis, that helped them have a better quality of life. And I don't know that I'd characterize it that way. It just helps keep them alive, and it really isn't much quality of life. But he was in dire need, and I was in a position where we ended up being a perfect match, and none of his family members were, and so we did it.
Wow. And his name?
Ed Cameron.
Hey Ed, good to see you again. So give him a shout out. So, you know, there's a lot of things that were going on at that time. Not just the kidney stuff, but, you know, a lot of, I guess you'd call it civil unrest, you know. And I wanted to ask you some questions that might be a little sensitive on that stand front, but okay, so you are a cop, but, you know, first and foremost, you're a person. How do you see the interaction between the police and for example, the black community and all that stuff? You know, what's your gut reaction and what's going on around the country?
It makes me sad in a lot of ways, because I think we're probably not making a good enough effort to understand each other. I know what's going on in my mind and the minds of most of the people that I work with, but I don't think we do as good of a job as we can or should do in helping other people to understand what our perspective is and what we really want in the work that we do. You know, we want to help people. We want to make situations better that we get involved in, and we should make judgments about what we do only on facts or evidence or circumstances and not who's involved in them.
I would agree. Now, if I remember right, you served in the military a number of years ago. Is it kind of common for people to go from the military into the police force, or how does that work?
There are a lot of people I work with who have military experience, either former active duty with one of the services, branch of the services, or people who are in the Guard or the Reserve. And they do seem to attract. Law enforcement is quasi-military in nature. There's a very solid command structure with rank and things like that. Of course, even civilian companies and corporations and things like that, they have their command structure, if you will.
Oh yeah.
But they go by different names.
Right.
You know, when you work for a law enforcement agency, the only thing I usually have to do when I'm in an assignment where I'm wearing a uniform, the only thing I have to do each day is decide if I'm going to wear a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt.
Yeah.
It does make selecting your wardrobe much easier.
Well, yeah.
And it's the same way in the military. You know, it's depending on what time of year it is. may help determine the uniform you wear, but there is something about that command structure that I think attracts people who have military experience to law enforcement.
Your wife wears a uniform as well.
She does.
A different kind of uniform, but she is, you know, you're what I call a first responder. Tell me a little bit about your wife.
My wife's been a nurse for 38 years. She has worked at the Veterans Hospital in Salt Lake for that entire time, except for the 4 years that we were away when I was on active duty in the Army. She's worked at a number of different assignments up there, but we lived in American Fork for 28 years, and people would say, why don't you work at the American Fork Hospital that's 5 minutes from your house instead of driving all the way to Salt Lake? And she says, it's because I love the vets. Once she gets connected with them, it's just something about serving those who have served and protected us that she loves doing. When she first hired on in 1983, she would occasionally see a World War I vet.
Whoa.
Of course, we don't see those anymore.
No.
But it's a reverent experience when you see somebody who has served, especially those who have encountered circumstances that were very difficult and maybe even life-threatening for them, to recognize that they were willing to do that. So she loves the vets, and that's why she stays there.
You obviously see a lot of stuff, and I'll be the first to say I couldn't do your job.
I don't think I could do yours either.
Well, yeah, you know, so I see a lot of the stuff that you do, you know, because now granted, I'm the media guy and you're the person that talks to the media, but, and you talk about all the various accidents or this and that and et cetera. How do you do it? I mean, how do you see some really bad stuff?
Well, we do, and people deal with it differently. For me, the way I deal with it, I try to look at it as something that somebody needs help with, whether it's, we talked about domestic violence, or whether it's somebody who's experienced an overdose, or somebody who's lost, or somebody who has fallen off a cliff, or somebody who has been in a crash, or somebody who has passed away. There's two things we can't do in this world without help, in my opinion. One is being born and one is dying. And when we had just recently an 81-year-old man who died in a horrific car crash.
Right.
And we got a communication after I put some things on social media about this from his granddaughter, and she humanized him for us, which is something I try to do, but I've never been very good at it, at realizing that beyond the investigation and maybe the immediate circumstances that led up to the investigation, what was this person like? So if you can humanize things, then you tend to be able to work your way through things a little bit more. And if you can recognize that despite the tragic nature of some circumstances that we get involved in, somebody has to be there to help them.
Right.
But we all do need a break from those things. If you just fill your life with those things day after day and you don't do something to decompress, then it can be problematic. And for me, my home is my sanctuary, and and my family. I love the people I work with, and I consider them some of my best friends, but I don't socialize with them outside of work very often, if ever. And it's not because I don't like them, but for me, I like getting together with my barber son and finding out how the cutting hair business is going, or my pilot son and finding out how the flying business is going, or my dispatcher daughter and finding out how the 911 dispatching business is going, or my caretaker daughter or my student daughter, and finding what's going on in your world and showing an interest in them. And it kind of helps me forget something awful that I might have seen. And I think I've gotten pretty good at that. But sometimes I have to do it consciously, or else I dwell on it too much and it starts to hurt.
How long have you been doing this now?
Over 30 years now.
Really? Wow. Without sounding strange, why do you? I mean, what makes Spencer Cannon wake up each morning and say, you know, it's time to get the uniform on and go out there?
I want to help somebody who needs help. Sometimes the help that we provide is not welcome, but it's still needed help. Sometimes the help that we provide is not is provided to people who don't want to be in that circumstance, some kind of a tragedy, but I want to be there to help people who need it.
Life is never boring. Sometimes you have something I like to call the wonderful world of regret. If you've ever had a tattoo or permanent makeup that you've fallen out of love with, the folks at Tattoo Away have come up with a pretty cool system that literally removes the ink out of the skin. Everyone has a story. Objects with stories are treasures remembered, and today we're keeping with that law theme with something a little shiny.
Let me take you back in time to around 1913. There's a busy little town called American Fork, Utah. One of the icons of the community is a store called Grant's Music Emporium. The proprietor was a gentleman by the name of William Grant. A newfangled contraption called an automobile, more specifically the Ford Model T, came through town traversing the dirt roads for the first time. No one had seen a car before in town, so Walter's youngest son, Melvin, apparently went to get a closer look. He slipped on the muddy road and got into what is registered as the first auto-pedestrian accident in American Fork, and who knows, maybe in all of Utah. Don't worry, though, little Mel was okay. Fast forward, and that little kid that got into an accident grew up to be a person that helps people avoid accidents as a member of the Utah Highway Patrol from 1935 until 1964. This badge right here was his. His grandson, Terry Grant, is now steward of this heirloom, which he received when he turned 8 years old. Everyone has a story. Objects with stories are treasures remembered.
Don't forget to breathe. Clear nasal spray helps me breathe better. I think it'll help you too. Come on, join me. Take a deep breath and relax. Thanks for watching this episode of Jessop's Journal, where we honor those that serve and protect us. It's my honor to be able to share powerful, positive, and inspirational stories every week right here on TV, as well as worldwide at jessopsjournal.com. Everyone has a story. Yes, you have a story. Those stories have power. They help us understand each other. With another entry into Jessop's Journal, I'm Doug Jessop.